Hello, everyone. It's 8:30, and I'm going to wait for Elisheva List to join me on our live. We are going to be discussing parenting in quarantine. And as soon as Elisheva joins and requests, then I can add her in. Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, Elisheva is joining us. We are talking tonight about parenting in quarantine. Hi, Elisheva.
Hey, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Thanks for the idea. I'm upset that I don't get to have a latte with this discussion, but after coronavirus, I will come and get it from you.
Yeah, somehow a virtual coffee is not the same, right?
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to let you take the lead on this, but I mean, I'm sure we both have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to let you take the lead because I feel like just in terms of the homeschooling, I mean, in terms of everything, I think you're much wiser and smarter than me, but
I don't know
for
about that.
sure in terms of homeschooling, just lately, like all of your posts have been so incredible and so empowering and so supportive. And everything I see, I'm like liking, saving, sending to family members that I know that they'll love. And so if you're not following Elisheva now, you really should be because she's offering so much amazing, valuable wisdom and support. And so, yeah, I'm going to let you start the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be doing this with you because I also very much respect your perspective. You have a really clear, pithy, punchy way of saying things that are like so true and so right. And like when you say them, it's kind of like you read it and you're like, oh yeah, for sure. That's so true. And so, I think that's one of the many reasons that we've become friends and very, mutually respectful colleagues. But I thank you because, I think one thing that you and I and most of our colleagues are trying to do right now is just kind of like spread as much healthiness and as many tools and as much advice as we can because people are really struggling. They're struggling in a lot of ways. There's the obvious concern about what's going on with the virus itself, but then there are just so many other ripple effects about the economy, about children being home, about people being out of their regular routine, about marriages. We're just kind of seeing with each day some of the effects that could be anticipated and some that people might not have thought of just because it's so far reaching. And I think that for people who have anxiety, and we tend to be a very anxious generation in the first place, even people who don't have clinical anxiety, we're just in a very fast-paced, frenetic society. But particularly with the epidemic of anxiety that we do have, even clinical anxiety, this is triggering a lot of things for a lot of people. I mentioned in one of my posts that in general, I try not to focus so much on children and parenting because I really am so sensitive to the people to whom that's not relevant. But I'm kind of making an exception these days because I just feel like families need so much support and they're under so much pressure from each other, pressure from schools, pressure from their own sense of like needing to do the right thing by their own standards, by imaginary standards, by what they're seeing on social media, by what they're being told by the older generation or people they respect or mentors or leaders. And there are just so many conflicting opinions flying around. And I think as mental health professionals, and in my case, particular as an educator and as a homeschool educator, I want to be able to kind of give people the confidence and the serenity to be able to say, hey, this is hard, but the world has gone through hard things before. This is not the first time there's been an epidemic. This is the first time, it's pretty unprecedented in our lifetimes to be affected by something this way. But people have been through crises before and we can manage crises, and that these are sort of unique opportunities to flex our psychological well-being muscles, to tap our own inner resources, to be gentle and kind with ourselves, with our spouses, with our children, and not to get sucked into the frantic energy that can sometimes be around us. I'm talking a lot, Rachel. Please feel free to like jump, chime in or, interject.
Everything that I'm thinking, and I actually have some questions that we've discussed like amongst ourselves, and I think that people would benefit hearing some of the insights that you had because you do know a lot about homeschooling and you are much more of like a pro at it. And I'm sure I'm speaking for so many people here when we are saying I have so much more respect. I always respect my children's teachers, but it is a hard job and we don't know what we are doing, It is hard to try to educate your children and we don't have the tools and we feel overwhelmed. And something that we were discussing the other day was like, some of us are feeling, I'm sure a lot of parents are like, is my kid going to learn anything being homeschooled right now. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to, are they really focusing on the online classes? Are they getting enough? Maybe they're not even getting so many online classes. Like, what is going to happen to them? And I know a lot of parents are messaging me the same concern. And it was something that we talked about where we were kind of joking, like, oh, our kids are going to be like dummies, you know? But what is going to happen? Are we okay if they're not getting that same level of learning, coupled with like, maybe they miss a class and then we're frustrated and they don't get it and they're trying to review what they just learned, but we don't know how to teach it to them. Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Do you remember what I posted on that chat? We're on a professional chat together.
Are we allowed to say like what we talk about in that chat? Because it's really not so professional. We don't want anyone seeing this in there.
We are all equally blackmailable.
We destroy our careers, all of us.
Anyway, so back to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, this particular conversation was pretty innocent. And there were some of the moms, particularly some of the younger moms, who were getting really, really nervous because what I was starting to touch on before, and I think this is really important to deal with, you know, one of the things conversations that you have a million times when you're a homeschooler is when people say, oh, where do your kids go to school? And I say, oh, we homeschool. The first reaction that many people will have was, whoa, I could never do that. Like, good for you. I could never do that. And what I often say to people, you know, just in casual conversation, I'll say, you know, you could, if you had to, you could, you know, fortunately you don't have to is usually where I go with that. But if you had to, for whatever reason, if your child had some sort of medical or psychological need that they needed to be homeschooling, you know, it's not something that you have to be a trained educator to do. It's not something that you have to be particularly gifted at doing. If you're reasonably intelligent and reasonably willing to learn things, right? If you have a growth mindset where you're saying like, I don't know how to do this yet, but I can learn how to do it, then it's something that can be done. I'm part of a few homeschool parent chats, and a lot of the people on these chats are not specifically educated, you know, particularly highly educated formally, but some of them are really wonderful homeschoolers. So I think that one thing to keep in mind is that there's a learning curve, and everybody, including the formal schools, have been thrust into this new reality, and nobody knows what they're doing. It's very, very cumbersome. And it doesn't seem to be translating well to take a brick and mortar school model with kids who are used to a routine and try to just stream it into people's homes and expect that it's going to be smooth. It's not. It's not going smoothly for the schools. The teachers are overwhelmed by it. The administrators are overwhelmed by it. There's no bad guy here. Everybody's overwhelmed. People are just kind of trying to offer some semblance of normalcy.
And I think
as someone who's been an educator,
having a hard time learning how to learn online because they're not used to that. And I see a couple comments here that are saying, my kid is having a hard time sitting at the computer. They need me sitting with them to help guide them. It's really a struggle on so many levels.
Yeah, and a lot of parents are feeling frustrated and confused because they feel like, you know, a lot of very idealistic parents are like, all these years I've tried so hard to limit my children's time sitting in front of a screen. And now I'm flipping the complete opposite way and being like, you have to sit right here in front of a screen, park it, and start learning. You know,
right.
And these are people who, you know, it's confusing for the parents, it's confusing for the kids. The whole concept of classroom management is a completely different topic when you're dealing with, you know, this virtual model. And there are actually a nice number of virtual elementary schools, but they're set up as virtual elementary schools. You can't just stick a teacher in front of a screen and start teaching. It's a completely different style. But of course, I'm not blaming the schools. They're doing what they can. You know, they're doing what they know how to do. But one thing that I am suggesting that a lot of parents take a step back and realize is your kid's academic keeping up is like really, really low on the objective priority list right now. One thing that a lot of parents don't realize, unless they're educators, is that the vast majority of what children learn in any given year is a recycle of what they've learned the year before and the year before that. So learning is sort of, it's not like this, or it's not linear, it's like a spiral, right? So in first grade, when they do addition and subtraction and telling time, and there are like a few different skills that they do, if you look at a second grade, I'm just using math because it's so concrete. If you look at a second grade workbook, the vast majority of pages in a second grade workbook could be completed by an average student come February or March of first grade. But right. They have to do a ton of review and they have to reinforce. And because kids learn on a bell curve themselves, they can't just assume because you taught the times tables in third grade that they know it cold in fourth and fifth grade. So they spent a ton of time reviewing. But I believe, and I'm saying this not just as a homeschooler, but actually someone who taught in high school and college for a number of years. So I know the classical education system too, that a reasonably bright child from a reasonably educated home, I don't mean parents with PhDs, I mean parents who read books occasionally, right? can miss a half a year of school and really not miss a tremendous amount, right? Particularly if we're talking about the even grades. Usually, and I'm being very general here, usually the odd grades are where they introduce new skills and the even grades are where they reinforce the skills from the year before. But it's not a big deal, because even in terms of like the falling behind fear, everybody's falling behind the same way. The entire country is shut down. So even if, let's say, like I was talking to a lot of parents today who were very worried about what's going to be with the regents, right? In New York, we have regents. They're very standardized curricula for math, science, English, and history for high school. So I was telling these parents, I'm like, listen, the regents department is going to have to figure something out, right? Either they're going to curve the regent, they're only going to create the regent that's on 2/3 or 3/4 of the material of the year, or they're going to postpone the regent, or they're just going to do away with it because they're going to realize that's not a priority. So that's I think something that parents really need to be aware of. It's not like every single day of elementary or high school is teaching something so critical and so not repeatable that, like, if they miss that, then they're going to be, like, you know, behind for life. Somebody's saying in the UK they cancel state exams for the year. Okay, that's smart. Right? Let people focus on their medical, their physical well-being, right? Everybody's public safety, right? Let people focus on their psychological well-being, because as we all know, I always tell people this, right? I'm like a decently educated adult, right? I have a master's, right? If I had to take the finals that I took in high school today, I don't think I would pass more than half of them. Right. Yeah. Right. And I teach high school level kids, I teach college level kids, right? But I haven't really, you know, visited chemistry or studied it in that way the same time. Right. I always joke, I'm like, I have a really good life and a good job, and SOHCAHTOA has never come up, you know, trigonometry. Right. So the majority of what you're learning past the junior high level, past the middle school level, is actually very gratuitous information. Right. So if people aren't learning it now, either they're going to make it up some other time, or they're going to not make it up and go on to lead a full and happy life. Right. If you need to know parabolas because you're going to be an engineer, you will relearn parabolas in college. Right. And in fact, in Europe and in Israel, they have what I think is a far more intelligent model of higher education. By the time you get to high school, right? By the time you get to high school, you know what you enjoy learning and what you tend to be good at. And you know what is a pain in the neck for you, right? So why should someone who's going to be a brilliant mathematician or a brilliant engineer be stuck memorizing Shakespearean sonnets, right? Or someone who loves literature be forced to take physics, right? So people major in the subjects that they want to go into, and then they take sort of like minor, let's say consumer math or nutrition, or the kinds of like math and science or other subjects that are not their major, just to the extent that they need to be a well-rounded citizen. Right. Okay. So we may be moving in that direction too. I don't know. But the point is, we're all in the same boat. Somebody just wrote that. Yes, we're all in the same boat. We need to take a total chill pill about worrying about the academics, right? There's two aspects to educating your children from home right now. There's the aspect of wanting them to stay stimulated, which I want everybody to calm down and not worry about, because, you know, they're going to catch it up at some point, or they're not going to catch it up because it's not important, one or the other. The other piece of it, and this is more important, is, well, if they're not in a curriculum and in a framework of scholastics, what exactly are they going to be doing all day? And so that's a much more serious consideration, because we don't want them to have so much free time on their hands that they become too anxious or too depressed or start bickering unnecessarily or destroying the world, you know, all the other things that kids do when they don't have enough stimulation. So once that's it, and by the way, that is more of a homeschooling, because I realize, like, so many people are miserable with this homeschooling because it's not homeschooling. They're just like, the school is trying to dominate their home. That's not homeschooling. Homeschooling is when the parents have the autonomy to create a system of learning that's going to cater to the needs and the pace and the personality and the interest of the children. And actually, it's a very beautiful, enjoyable, low pressure form of learning. Right. Most homeschoolers today rely heavily on the educational value of play. Right? We play a lot of games, we read, we color, we take music lessons. Right. Somebody wrote, my homeschool is focused on cleaning and doing dishes, so I don't have to. Can I tell you, I was an A student in high school, but then I got married and tried to set up my own home. I didn't even realize that you're supposed to wipe down counters. I had no domestic abilities. It would have been so worthwhile for me to trade in some of those academic skills and know how to, you know, deal with finances and budgeting, you know, like real life skills. So if you're educating your children about, hey, I'm making Passover, I'm making Pesach, if you're talking them through, this is how we make dinner, this is how a normal person cleans up after they have a meal, right? You're giving them life skills that are far more valuable than, you know, how to split an infinitive. Right. Yeah. Okay. I have a soapbox on all these things.
And that's so reassuring. And that's something that's occurred to me like quite a few times when my kids are like not doing anything, or there's, you know, because my younger ones have less structure than my older ones. And every time I'm like, oh my God, like, ugh, what's going to be? My older one, I feel like, you know, she's already older. She's learned a lot. My younger ones, I'm like, these are the formative years and all that guilt and guilt and guilt, right? Because I can't give it to them because I'm busy and I'm doing other things and I'm not an educator. So I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. But then I remind myself, like, you know what, though? Learning how to, you know, we actually took on a project that I've been delaying forever. And I'm not like, oh, family projects. It just happens to be, I was like, you know what, you have nothing else to do. And let's just get this out of the way. Like, we painted a dresser in the house, you know, and so they helped me paint. And yeah, it was great. There was a lot of yelling and fighting. Don't get me wrong. It was not beautiful. And I would be ashamed if any of you witnessed how I was behaving when it was happening. But it happened.
It's
and they
so
helped.
important for people to hear that, Rachel, because you're such a guru on Instagram, and it's such a gift to be able to tell people, I am sometimes not proud of my parenting moment.
I'm not proud. But we got it painted. And I think for the most part, there's good memories. I hope. Maybe they would tell you a different story if they were here. But we got it done. And I'm like,
It's
you know
all
what?
about the pictures.
Yeah, it's it was great. They felt like a part of it. We got the supplies, they mixed the paint, we showed them how to do it, everybody took a turn. We were very, you know, careful and precise, and okay, let's think about the process and the steps, and we have to let it dry, and then we'll come back and, you know, now let's empty the drawers, let's put everything in, we're gonna get the hardware and put it on. These are life skills. You know, now when you're older and there's a piece of furniture, like, you know what to do, you know, like, and I think that's so great, you know. So, okay, she didn't learn her spelling or her math today necessarily, but like we did something that she feels super proud of and that is enhancing her life now in, you know, so many different ways. So I've just kind of like been thinking about that, you know, and trying. It was funny also because today also we were playing like Operation, that game. And I was like, okay, I'm going to like use my like basic, what I think are teacher skills. And like, okay, I'll just have her like name each thing and count the pieces when we put them in and count them when we put them back and figure out which one matches which. And so even like the most basic little things that you feel like, ugh, like, what am I trying to do? Like, just do it anyway. Any way that we're stimulating their brains, like you said, we're stimulating their brains. Even just by talking with them, we're stimulating their brains. Like, don't underestimate the value of just a conversation with, ugh, isn't it so boring to be home? It must be so hard that you miss your friends. Like, that stimulates their brains too. You're making connections, you're talking with them, the relationship, like, that's valuable too. And that's not something you get in school, you know? And we always see those memes of all the things we never learned in school, like how to file our taxes and, you know, basic life skills. So maybe this is a great opportunity to give them, I mean, don't teach them to file their taxes. You don't have to do that. But, you know, other basic life skills, maybe we can stop and like start doing that. So yeah, have them help clean up the house, have them learn to do laundry, have them learn to do dishes, stuff like that, where like this will be a time in their life where they really get skills that they're usually too busy or too tired to have because they have such a long day at school. And maybe we don't ask them to do those things because they don't have time or they're not around or they're exhausted or it's just not, there's not an opportunity for it. So right now, probably a lot of you don't have cleaning help in the home, or your kids just have a lot of downtime. Let them participate in helping in the house. That's great. I think that's great schooling, you know? But again, I think like what you're saying and what we all have to get out of is like, we think that learning is like sitting at their desks and learning math and science and English. But there's so much more learning that they could be doing that's just as valuable and a lot more meaningful because they're not going to remember a lot of these things that they're learning now. They don't really have much value for them later in life. Shh, don't tell in case they're listening, you know, but we have to kind of, I guess, just refocus on like, and work with what we have right now, work with what's in front of us and not being afraid of like what they're missing and what we're doing wrong and how we're not good enough, you know? And I think that that follows into the next piece of our conversation where we named this Sanity. What was it? It was parenting in quarantine, Sanity. I'm looking at what we called it.
Sanity, schooling and scheduling or something?
Scheduling, yeah. I'm looking
I like alliteration.
Yeah, yeah, sanity, scheduling, schooling. So like maintaining our sanity during all of this challenging, you know.
It's so much more important than any of those specific academics. And when you were talking about life skills as opposed to scholastic skills, I think that the longer this goes on, the more like the children and the adults are going to start to realize how irrelevant so much of regular book learning and schooling is, and how much more valuable and meaningful it is. You know, you have a little kid who's saying, I'm bored, I miss my friends. You could teach them the word social. You could teach them the word stimulation. If you want to teach them Jewish education, you could teach them about Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh and Chavra Chavra Itle. You know, like there's so many ways that you can spiral off. We've done a ton of, my kids are a little older now, but when they were little, we did a ton of journaling instead of like the traditional davening, you know, saying words that people didn't know. We had davening journals where they would write letters to God. You know, and make things come alive in a much more organic way. And somebody wrote one of the comments that was popping up on the screen said something very intelligent also, that teaching children how to deal with adversity in a way that's real but also healthy, how to label their feelings, how to acknowledge like this is frustrating, I'm annoyed, I wish I had my own bedroom but I don't, you know, being able to talk about and deal with and accept the fact that things are not necessarily the way I would like them to be today or in general. And be able to calibrate, be able to modulate and say like, yeah, this is hard, I'm having a hard time with that, and problem solve, figure out, okay, well, we can't go outside right now, but what can we do? You know, we can't get together with a friend, but what can we do? You know, and I think that learning to think outside that box, learning to be creative, learning to problem solve and to troubleshoot is infinitely more resourceful and important for this changing world. You know, coronavirus notwithstanding, you know, I once saw like a really good quote about how most of the things that you can major in when we were in college are obsolete right now, you know, in terms of marketability, right?
Yeah.
So the world is changing very, very dramatically just because of the, you know, post-technology revolution world. So really what we want to give our kids is thinking skills. We want to give them confidence. We want to give them the ability to articulate and to express themselves and to talk to other people, even members of their own family. I remember there was a story that I like to tell people. I got a call from my son. He's older now, but when he was little in preschool, the teacher said, your son said the funniest thing. I said, what? She said he took a drink of water. Did I ever tell you the story, Rachel? He took a drink of water and he started to cough. And the teacher said, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I was drinking, and the water, it went down my trachea instead of my esophagus. So this was, my kids did go to preschool. We started homeschooling when they were a little bit older. And she's like, why does he even know to say that? I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I just figure instead of telling them, oh, it went down your windpipe instead of your food pipe, I might as well teach them the biologically correct words. Right. And, you know, I'm not really good with little kids. So I just treated my little kids as if they were bigger kids. And, you know, so they sounded a little funny when they were younger, but then they had, you know, a better vocabulary as they got older. And so right. I always encourage people, do not get into the habit of coochie-cooing your kids. I mean, when they're little babies, okay, that's fun. But, you know, as they get older, and especially now, by speaking to them just the way you speak to your peers and your cohorts, you're giving them vocabulary. You know, if you were to crack open the SAT books that we studied, you know, to increase our SAT vocabulary, the majority of those words you would sound absolutely bombastic if you used in colloquial conversation, right? But to be an eloquent, you know, well-spoken individual, if you talk to your children in a reasonably mature and, you know, sophisticated way, if you read with them and to them, or put books on tape, I'm old, but you know, recordings on YouTube that they could listen to. Even by having them watch television programs or podcasts where there's intelligent conversation being discussed, foreign policy, politics, current events, psychology, areas of interest that are just interesting to them, they're going to pick up vocabulary in a much more organic, much more life user-friendly way. So you don't need a vocabulary. I remember that a few years ago, I got rid of the vocabulary books. I'm like, my kids don't need vocabulary books. The words that they put in those books are not words that they're ever going to use again. I'd rather just speak to them in an intelligent way and teach them how to speak intelligently. You know, so you know, so these are things. So I always tell parents like who are starting with homeschooling or think about homeschooling, you have more educator in you than you realize. You have been teaching your children from day one. They observe, they watch us, right? When we teach our children how to eat and how to walk and what sound the animals make, right? We've been teaching our children since before they went to school. We just kind of lost the habit of thinking of ourselves as their educators. But once you get into that groove and into that mindset of like anything can be a lesson, you know, then that's when the fun really starts. but really be patient, because it shouldn't be a pressure. It's just sort of like the world is their classroom. You know, one thing that we've started to do as my kids got older was we started to travel. And I used to try to like buy these books and look up websites so that we could go and have these like cultural experiences and go to museums and prepare by learning the language when we go places. And I realized that I was working too hard, like just exposing them to other cultures and other people and other in my case, religions, I was comfortable doing that, you know, but gave them an opportunity to just organically, like, kids are natural explorers, they're natural scientists, they're going to ask the questions. And the Dubna Magid says that just like food is tastier when you have an appetite, information is more enjoyable when you have curiosity, right? So you're going to, if they come up with the questions themselves, if we teach them to think critically, to think analytically, then the answers and the information that they come up with are much less important than the fact that we're teaching them to be, you know, to be researchers of the world around them. And that happens over time.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised. I know it's too soon to say this, but I would not be surprised if we see an uptick in the number of homeschooling families after all the dust settles from this, because, you know, it can be a wonderful experience. Oh, somebody cute joined you.
This is what happens when we homeschool. Bedtimes are, you know, as strict as we'd like.
Oh, that's a good segue into the topic of scheduling.
Yeah, scheduling. Let's talk about that.
You want to kick off the scheduling discussion, Rachel?
So I've been posting a lot about it because I am seeing, and I happen to be, I think if you are the type that loves scheduling and you're great at it, it is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a gift. Yeah. And I've seen some incredible schedules, and I know that some people that are doing them, and I'm like, this is so her. Like, she's
That's
just
wonderful for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's awesome. And I'm sure it's working for their families. But I know for a lot of other people, it's like super stress inducing. And they're like, oh my God, like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I want to do that, but, or they try to do it.
Like a failure if it doesn't work, like if it's
and they try to do it and it doesn't work out, or they're not as creative, or they try to execute someone else's schedule, and then they're just feeling awful about themselves, and then they end up yelling at their kids because their kids aren't responding to the schedule in the way that they want.
Too much
so
conflict.
If a schedule works for you, and I don't want people to think when I'm posting about schedules that I'm shaming anyone who does them. Again, if you do them and you're great at them, awesome. And I'm so happy that that works for you. But there are a lot of people that it doesn't work for. And I don't want them to feel like that there's something wrong with them, because they're, you know, not everybody has that creative, organized gene where, you know, they can do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you've got to do what works for you. Yeah. And someone said, I'm working full time. Like, if you're juggling your jobs, and I know for sure in my house what's going on is my husband is working, I'm working, trying to get this one on Zoom, trying to set one in her, I'm making sure she's taking care of her classes. Like, I can't make a schedule that's so rigid and make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to do, because if I'm balancing trying to see my clients and my husband's on calls, and we just can't do it.
Yeah.
So I kind of like surrendered to the schedule. I said, I'm going to keep it super basic. And I posted today what my schedule is looking like in my home. We are trying to keep to regular, obviously tonight it was not working, regular bedtime and wake times. Like, we wake up the same time, a little bit later now because we're not rushing for the bus, but we get up, we eat breakfast, we daven. I have my daughter davening with her class on Zoom, like really trying to keep some kind of normal schedule.
Yeah.
So that it's a little bit normal. And that's it. And the bar is so low here, so that every day when we accomplish that schedule, even if, you know, okay, so tonight bedtime isn't going the way I would like it to go, but you know what, we did
They can sleep a little later in the morning. That's one of the benefits of this lifestyle.
7:45 tomorrow, not 7:30, you know, but it's okay. You know, so I think
somebody asked an important question. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but someone asked a really important question. They said, because I think a lot of people are having this issue, what do you do if your school is pushing the kids to be present for the live Zoom, meaning like in real time Zoom classes, but it's proving to be a disaster for your kid or family? So I'll tell my answer. I don't know if Rachel, you agree, so we'll each give our answer unless we happen to agree. My feeling is that the hierarchy of priority needs for your family are: number one, medical and physical safety; number two, psychological and emotional well-being; number three, family function, right? So academic routine is pretty low on my priority list of things that have to get done. Now, if you're getting a lot of pressure from your kid's school, the principals or the teachers, you know, I'm not judging them. I think they think they're doing something that's helpful to you. And maybe like on a group level, there's something nice for some people about feeling like, oh yeah, they're going to clock in with their classmates. It's great. If it's not working for your family, don't force it. It's not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it. If I don't know how aggressive some of the schools are being with this, I can't imagine they're going to drive you, like they're going to penalize or whatever. But if they do say, okay, well then, you know, you're going to be considered truant or something, then it's actually super easy to file a letter of intent to the district, to your district. For a letter of intent is a formal statement that you are planning to be homeschooling your child. And then you just let them know we're planning to be homeschooling. And you can Google sample letter of intent for homeschooling in whatever district you are, and it'll tell you exactly what you need to write. It's like 1 page long. And you can just formally declare yourself a homeschooler. If you want to be really creative, you could tell your school that you're asking back for your tuition back, but they're not going to give it to you. But it's more worthwhile. I don't think you're going to have to go that far, by the way. I think it's absolutely fine to just tell the school, listen, we really, really appreciate that you're offering us the option to Zoom into classes. I think it's incredibly dedicated of the teachers to be available for that. It's just not working for my family right now. If at some point my child is able to join, that would be great for him or her. It would be nice for us. But right now, my priority has to be the medical and psychological well-being of the children, and it's not working for us. What I hope some of the schools will go to is recording the Zoom calls, so that like a lot of the adult learning that happens, when I take an online learning program, I only take the ones that record the classes so I can get back to it afterwards, because it does. So, so what I'm hoping they'll do is they'll start recording them. And that way you have, I want you as the families, and hopefully the schools will get on board with this, to see these as optional tools and resources that you can use as you try to structure the day and stimulate the children so that they're not, just going bonkers and completely, out of whack. Rachel, do you basically agree with that?
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that really, if you see that your kid is overwhelmed, say, you know what, let's go take a walk, take a break. And if they have a schedule, some teachers are emailing a schedule, 9 to 9:30, do this, 10 to 10:45, do that. And I had it today with one of my kids. Like, you know what? It's fine. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be.
It's a suggestion. It's a recommendation.
If you're not in the mood today, like, it's okay. We're cooped up in the house. Like, let's go take a break. Let's go play a game. Let's go do something. At the end of the day, you guys are all stuck in the house together. And like you said, family function, medical, physical safety, psychological well-being, and psychological and emotional well-being. Like, you have to deal with the backlash of not having them take care of themselves. So you've got to be really like honoring their needs and their wishes. And again, it's not like, letting them get away with whatever. We're in a sensitive time right now. And just like you feel very fragile and overwhelmed and stressed out and anxious, magnify that a lot more for a kid who maybe doesn't understand or feels stressed out by this or feels like it's not fair and doesn't really even understand the heaviness of it all. Even if they kind of get what's going on, they don't understand the magnitude of what's going on like we do, because we have more access to media and we understand
perspective. Yeah,
we have that perspective. So I'm totally on the same page. Like, if it's not working, it's not worth the fight. It's just not worth it. And if you shove them in front of that computer, they're not learning.
You don't have the ability to force that anyway. Children don't enjoy learning when they're forced. I started to do a post, I didn't write it up yet, but I wrote something like, learning is kind of like religion. If you try to shove it down your kid's throat, they're gonna barf it all over you. Kids. I try. I had another comment about the schedules, which I think might be a nice compromise for a lot of people who are struggling with the feeling of like, on the one hand, I don't want to wake up in the morning and have these 14 hours of just free fall chaos. And on the other hand, I don't want to stress myself out by feeling the need to cling to like a rigid schedule. Like everything else in parenting and in life, there's something like balancing, like something about, a little bit of both, some sort of compromise. So what I found when I started like working on my own time management as an adult was that I found that there's a phrase that I borrowed from Dennis Prager, which I like very much. What he talks about is standards at the macro level with compassion at the micro level. So when I would create my schedule, I would do it like in pencil, literally and metaphorically. So I would say like, it feels good for me. And I'm not a very organized person by nature, but I do like to be productive. So it feels good for me to sit down the night before or the beginning of the week and pencil in. The system that I use is 30-minute blocks of time. Pencil in what I want to do for each of those, hour or 30-minute blocks of time. But I'm doing it in pencil and I'm doing it with no expectations. The benefit of doing it like that is that at any given point in the day, and I've done this with my children, different with my kids in a minute, I'll tell you what we ended up coming up with for all of them. But But what's nice about it is that any given point in the day, I can look at that pencil calendar and just sort of say like, oh, what did I have in mind that I could do now? And if it's something that that still makes sense for me to do, or I'm still interested in doing, I can go ahead and do it. And I know that I'm being productive. And if it's something that no longer makes sense, or I'm just not really in the mood for, and it's not essential, I can forego it and sub in something else without any guilt. But it kind of gives me like an optional framework, like a tentative idea, an itinerary of things that can be done. So if you can get in the habit of doing that for yourself, being gentle enough and proactive enough to say like, hey, here's what a sample day routine could look like, but we have to tweak it as we go along because we're new at this, and because I don't even know if it's going to like make sense for each of the kids or for myself as we do it, but we could do it collaboratively. I'm a huge fan of family meetings. If your kids are old enough to have family meetings, do it at least once a week, have a discussion, what's working, what's not, who has requests, who has concerns. You know, kids love to be heard. Even if you're not going to solve all their problems, it's incredibly therapeutic and bonding for people to like put it all out on the table. So one way to do schedules is to do it in pencil and to sort of say like it's an organic process. You're going to be tweaking it and adjusting as you go along on any given day and also over the course of time. That's number one. Another thing that worked much better for our family is we stopped making, for myself, I have a very regimented schedule because I work. I do client sessions in the morning and the evening. So for me, it works very well to organize my time half hour by half hour. But what my children prefer to do, and it works very nicely for them, is they have a list of daily goals. So each day they have mandatory goals, and the mandatory goals are very loose. You know, there's certain subjects that we try to do mandatorily daily, including math and Parsha, you know, the few subjects that are sort of either standardized or time sensitive. And then they have a bunch of optional goals, things that just have to get done eventually over the course of the year, or things that they want to do for fun, like if they're studying a foreign language, if they're practicing musical instruments, if they're doing, you know, yoga videos, or, you know, other things that are just for their own, extracurricular edification. And then they have for fun stuff. And for fun stuff for me is almost like mandatory, because let's say when you're a homeschooling mom, and to this end, right now we're all homeschooling parents, it becomes incumbent on the parent to make sure the children are fostering their social relationships. Yeah. And so whereas in the past you could just rely on like sending your kid off to school and like they'll find people to play with at recess generally, now we have to make sure that our kids are actually getting on FaceTime calls with their friends and neighbors and cousins and the people in their lives, because otherwise all of a sudden they could just fall out of touch with them, and we don't want them to feel lonely. Rachel had a terrific picture of one of her kids playing Pictionary with a friend. I thought that was so cute.
Really? See, I was very proud of myself. I came up with that.
Fantastic. We always did it with my nieces and nephews in Israel, but it didn't occur to me that they could actually do it right here.
It was great. It was such a great, and they loved it. She was
so
busy.
Much fun. Yeah. So I think that's something like in between, like the order and the chaos is usually going to be a better bet, because kids are not so easily structured. There are very few families that can go by, you know, there's some individual parents who are incredibly regimented and disciplined by nature, and it works best for them when their kids wake up and go to sleep at specific times and take their meals and snacks and naps and, you know, at specific times. There are occasional families who really function well like that. I think the vast majority of families are not going to do well with that level of rigidity, and the vast majority of families are not going to do well with complete and total mayhem. And so, you know, being able to find that sweet spot where you have, you know, as the parents and as the children, a general sense of like every hour of the day, if a kid says, okay, what should we do now? You have some suggestions for them. You have some options, some ideas. Then they feel like they have a foothold. There's something like, oh, we could play this game. We could bake these cookies. We could read this book. We could call this grandma and see how she's feeling. You know, something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think of the point that you were making about kids like having that social interaction and FaceTiming and keeping that up. I think that's important also just for us as the parents to remember, like, we need to do that too.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not doing that either. You're not going to Minyan anymore. You're not going to shul on Shabbos. Like, so much of our social interaction has been taken away from us. They're telling us now, at least in my community, like, plan for your Siddurim to be by yourself.
That's your family. Yeah.
There is a lot, and Pesach, Passover in the Jewish community, you go to synagogue. That's what it's all about, getting together with friends and family and community. And now we're not going to have that. It will feel very socially isolating. So you have to make sure that just like we want our kids to do that, we have to take care of ourselves also in that way. So do a video chat, not just what's happened, also FaceTime with a friend, talk to people, make sure you see them, you know, go for walks and see human life outside, wave from across the street. But that's so important for us too. Like, we have to make sure we take care of ourselves in that way also. And I think we forget that, especially because we're so busy trying to make everyone's schedules work. Like, you forget that at the end of the day, you needed to connect with someone too, and not just your spouse or not just your kids or not just your mother if you're living with your parents, and not just your sister, someone else, a friend, a therapist, another human being that you're not living with. That's really important, you know? So we want our kids to do it. We also have to do it, you know?
It's so true. And one of the best ways to teach our kids what is good and what works is by modeling it themselves. There was at one point in the afternoon, I was thinking like, this would really be a good time for a healthy snack, but nobody was like going to be interested. So I just took out a bowl of baby carrots and some like mini hummus containers, and I started eating them. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really good. And all of a sudden it was like, this terrible analogy, but like when you drop food and the ants come. All of a sudden everybody's crunching loudly on baby carrots and hummus. So I could have like offered everybody food for, say, who wants a snack, who's hungry, blah, 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 like Jewish mothers selling food, but it's not helpful to do that. But whereas if I just sort of model and say like, I'm kind of hungry and I want to eat something that's like not garbage right now, and then they're going to, and then they're going to join. And the same thing is true, when I call a friend. I have some friends that my kids enjoy also. And instead of telling them, guys, you should really make sure to keep in touch with your friends, I just call my friend Malka, who's like super fun. And I'm like, hey, everybody, say hi to Mrs. What, and they're saying hi to her and they're having fun and they're laughing and she's showing us her manicure. And then it makes them in the mood to call, their friends and cousins. So it's so true. Like when we take care of ourselves, we're not just taking care of our children's parents, but we're also teaching our children how to take care of themselves, because they're more likely to do what they witness than what we just preach at them. So, yeah.
And a question that I got that actually someone messaged to me was, this is actually a common thing also for people that like don't live in homes, live in apartments or very small spaces.
So challenging right now. Yeah. So difficult right now.
Nowhere to go. It's not so easy to just go to your backyard and run around your acres of land. And it's really hard for them to see that on social media, to which I say, don't look at those accounts.
Don't watch if it's going to upset you. Yeah.
Right. For you, like, just put it away. Don't look. But then they say, like, how do I survive when I have 2 rooms that I can be in? And my kids only have a limited amount of space to be in. Like, how do I stay sane in that situation?
It's a tough one. Yeah.
That's hard. And I think that there needs to be, I think there needs to be a lot of empathy, and that needs to be a discussion, especially when we're saying like, take time for yourself and take space for yourself. But if you don't have space.
Not always so easy to do if you have tiny kids and no room. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone says, I live on the 4th floor and we're quarantined in a small apartment.
Yes.
This is really hard.
It's really, really hard. Somebody posted, I shared it on my stories today, and I was ambivalent about sharing it because I think we're all trying to walk this line between having empathy and compassion and grace and allowing ourselves and everybody else to feel all the feelings and get messy with it. But at the same time, to also try to inspire ourselves to grow from this situation and bring out the best version of ourselves and our families. And it's kind of like walking a tightrope, like we're looking for gentleness and we're looking for strength. It's a very spiritual idea. But there was something that was posted on Instagram by actually a Christian homeschooling mom whom I follow, and she had posted, it was very eloquently done. She posted an excerpt from the diary of Anne Frank, where Anne Frank describes the extremely limited windowless space that her entire family was sharing during the war. And of course, like, God forbid, we're not like comparing anything like this, but at the same time, I think the reason that The Choice by Dr. Ager has been such a wildly successful memoir is because, until this happened, we were living in such a relative bubble of luxury and comfort and, and just life being so convenient that, that we really haven't had to cope with this level of uncertainty and fear and discomfort. And so reading stories about other people who've been through even more challenging situations, not to make us feel guilty or compare or to feel horrible about myself, but just to sort of like be inspired and to say, what, people can go through hellish situations and come out, strong and resilient and productive and brilliant, and live to tell the tale. That's encouraging. And so I'm not here to minimize how incredibly excruciatingly difficult it is to be trapped in a 4th floor apartment with little kids. Like you said, it just requires acknowledgement and empathy and like, wow, that is really, really hard.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time, it's interesting that you say this. We were just FaceTiming with my little nieces who are in a 2-bedroom apartment, no porch, no backyard, no courtyard or anything. And we were playing games with them on FaceTime. And I was like amazed. My sister-in-law is like such a special person. And she was like laughing and playing with the kids, and they were singing. And it was, you know, a little chaotic because they're little kids. But even within a situation that's so challenging like that, I admired her decision and the choice that she made to make it as smiley and fun and relaxed as possible, not like screaming and getting frustrated and demanding so much of herself and the kids. So, you know, the same advice, you know, be gentle, be kind to yourself and to your family, holds true in smaller quarters also. It's just, you know, it has to be acknowledged that it's not the same as when you have a backyard or a basement where you can run around. You know, it's just not, you know.
Yeah. And I think one other point that I think is important to emphasize is that, and someone I saw commented earlier before, is that we have to remember that a lot of the teachers that are teaching our kids are in the same position as we are.
Yep.
They're trying to work and teach our kids and manage all of their kids and all of their lives behind the scenes. So I think that we have to have a little bit more patience. And it's hard when you're like, why isn't the teacher more structured? And why doesn't my kid have more learning?
They're not trained to do this. This is not.
Like you said, they're taking a school model that was like in person, in the building.
Not their fault. Yeah.
It's not the same thing to switch it to online. It's a completely different way of teaching and learning. So they're literally overnight, because it just happened that all of a sudden we were like, all right, nobody's going back to school, online learning.
Right.
They have to completely train themselves in a new way of teaching and communicating with their students and changing all of their lesson plans, which may have been group work or whatever it is. Like, they have to change everything. So as frustrating as it is for us, I think if we have more empathy and patience with the teachers, I think that also helps you to let go a little bit of your expectations of your kids. Yeah. You know what? The teachers are figuring it out also. Don't worry about it. You know, like, I'm sure your teacher will be okay if you didn't get the assignment finished or whatever. And as the parent, it's your job to communicate respectfully with the teacher. She's overwhelmed. We're so sorry we didn't get to it. And I'm assuming most teachers will be understanding during this time because, like I said, they themselves are overwhelmed.
They're also overwhelmed. Yeah. Yeah.
And not having an easy time with this. So I think just empathy and respect for the teachers and for all the things they're doing. And when
the communication piece that you mentioned is so important.
Yes. And respectful communication. Even if you're frustrated, remember that you are speaking to a person who's also frustrated and stressed and trying to do their best. So thank you so much. I know that this is so hard for you. Here's just some of the concerns I want to share. And I know that you're going to, do your best. And I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and thank them in a WhatsApp. You can thank them when they send the assignments for the day, you can privately thank them or thank them in the mom group, the parent group, say, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Just let them know that you appreciate all their hard work. It's really, really hard. And I've seen some teachers really struggling with this online stuff. And
yeah,
it's not.
And also, a lot of them have their own little kids at home. A lot of teachers have told me, you think I want to be doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some teachers have their kids next to them, and they're like, "Shh, I'm trying to teach you."
I'm trying to teach.
It's so hard for them to balance it all. So we have to remember, they also have lives, and it used to be they could come to school and be fully present for our kids, but now they're at home trying to be fully present for our kids. And if we can't even do it, imagine all the more so for them still trying to teach our kids. So really practicing gratitude and respectful communication.
And to show the kids, that is a fantastic life skill, to be able to appreciatively express to a professional or a service provider or just anyone in their lives, thank you so much for helping me with or offering me or trying to give me A, B, or C. It happens to be that it's not working for me right now. Can we adjust? Can we change it? So many people are just afraid to broach a conversation where there's any level of disagreement. But if a child can see you having that conversation with their teacher or, can have that conversation if they're a little older, with the teacher, that's a wonderful life skill to be able to teach, to show, but on the one hand, the gratitude, on the other hand, the assertiveness to be able to say, what, I think I'm having some trouble with, and, can we figure out an alternative way to do this?
Yeah, and teaching empathy by kind of giving them that perspective of wow, it must be so hard for Sarah to be doing this because we know she has a family too. Wow, she's doing such a great job, and it's so hard for us. Even more for her, she's still trying to teach you. So again, these are amazing life skills that are making them into good people more than that trigonometry or that history or these are the things that are going to get them farther in life. Oh, wow, I love homeschooling. Forget it. I'm so old. It is just so much more valuable. I think it's just like this conversation has been very therapeutic for me. Just a shift of perspective. That's what it is. And you made so many great points that I want to like review before we wrap this up, which was, I was writing them as you were saying them. You were saying that keeping up is really low priority right now. That really spoke to me, like, because that is, I think, a concern of a lot of parents. Keeping up, bottom of the list, guys. Like Alicia said earlier, learning is a spiral. A lot of it is review and reinforcing skills from the previous year. If your child is reasonably bright, they're not going to be harmed by this. Everyone's, going to graduate and do okay. A lot of what they learn is, like you were saying, extra. I'm not knocking teachers, but just this is how
it's set up. The teachers are doing their job.
That's how the education system works. That's what we do. A lot of review to build more skills.
I want to add something else to that, Rachel. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I read something when we first started homeschooling that I really found to be true. It said that on average, what you need 40 minutes for in a classroom full of other students, you can do in 10 or 12 minutes one-on-one tutelage. So we have never spent more than 2 or 3 hours a day in like formal schooling total with all the children, Kodesh and Chol, like that's a dual curriculum, right? That doesn't include like gymnastics and ballet and piano and all that stuff, but it includes all of the Judaic and secular subjects. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, my kids are missing out on so much. It could be that if they did an hour or two of the lessons that the school sent, that they actually really covered what they needed to for the day. So just remember that also.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You also were saying that, like, and I love this point, and this is great. And I think you did a post on this. You were saying we've been teaching our kids from day one. Like from the time that they were babies, like we helped them learn to speak and to walk and to communicate and to deal with their feelings and to be nice to their siblings or to clean up their toys. Like we've given them so many skills that are so valuable already. Like it doesn't stop. We don't send them to school and then we're like, oh, we don't know what to do anymore. We're still their teachers, and life skills versus scholastic skills. Like that's so important. And to focus on, again, like you were saying, those priorities, the medical and physical safety, their psychological and emotional well-being and family function. Like we have to just reprioritize and reconfigure like what's been important and like the priority for us until this point, because we're facing a completely new reality. So we need to just switch it all and not be like, well, but they might go back to school in a couple of weeks, so I want to just stick with what we've been doing. Like just tell yourself, you know what, I don't know what's going to be, so I'm just going to make this my new normal, and this is what's going to work for me. And God willing, when they do go back, and we hope everyone gets well and this goes away and it's soon, then I'll shift back to what we used to do.
And by the way, at that point, whenever it is, hope to God it's sooner than later, everyone will be in the same boat then too, of trying to readjust and reintegrate. And that will be a process again for the teachers, for the students, for the administrators again.
Like now we have to bring them to school. We got to get them on the bus. Oh my God,
It's one of my favorite parts of homeschooling is not rushing to school buses and carpools. And by the way, that's something to enjoy. Like take note of that, try to feel it in, like a pleasure of the little things. To this day, whenever I drive past a school bus, I always like breathe a little sigh of like, it's so nice not to have to deal with those things anymore.
And have a breakfast and talk and not rushing, and you're not throwing things in lunch bags. It's just
really
nice.
being present.
Yeah. And I think that our final point was like just empathy and kindness to the teachers and gratitude. And remembering that everybody's in their own difficult situation, and we shouldn't, we shouldn't kind of like dictate to people what they should be doing, because not everybody has the same privilege, access, whatever it is that we have.
Family needs,
So don't compare. Also, don't, tell people what to do. What works for you, awesome. Like I said, if that schedule is like, great, amazing. But if you can't do the schedule, like you don't need to feel the pressure to do it. Just like embrace your messiness, like you said, embrace the messiness. Don't be rigid about things. Figure out what works for you. And then hopefully, everybody will be in a saner space. And that's really what we want to be. We want to be sane. We want everyone to be happy.
Yeah.
Healthy. That's what counts.
Yeah. I know we have to wrap up in a couple minutes. I just wanted to make a couple of other points. It's like I could talk to you for hours, Rachel. It's such a pleasure. There was There was one more thing I wanted to tell parents. Don't be afraid of boredom. Don't be afraid for kids to be bored. Don't be afraid for yourself to be bored. I think that in our like very technological, fast-paced, overstimulated society, people are just like so scared of like this like vacuum of time. But boredom is actually a gift. It gives people, adults and children alike, opportunity to sit with their thoughts, to notice their feelings, to inhabit their bodies, to say to themselves like, hey, I have a little time here. What would I like to do right now? And it's a really great skill. My kids know never to tell me that they're bored, because I could always just give them like some sort of like academic work to do or housework to do. So, you know, they learned how to, because they have a lot of time, they've learned how to utilize their time in ways that are either productive or enjoyable. You know, and so having conversations with children, because the majority of adults have to structure their own time. They're not going to be in a programmed environment their whole lives. So, you know, don't be afraid of boredom. You can come up with a bucket list of activities so that you can make suggestions, especially if your children are little, but don't feel like you need to program every minute of the day. That's another really good point. And something that is just has come up in a bunch of my like client sessions that I think I want to just toss in there. For women whose husbands are usually the primary breadwinners and are usually out of the house, and now they're home, there's a lot of friction between couples around this. Moms, ask your husbands for the help that you need. They don't do this regularly, so they're not going to intuit and think of it on their own. They're not trying to be lazy or selfish or passive aggressive or heartless. They're not in the groove. It's like you have a PhD in parenting and they're just like in grade 2. So, and I don't mean to be pejorative to the men, but if you're in a traditional gender stereotype family setup where mom is usually doing the parent responsibilities and now dad is around, do not be afraid to ask for the help that you need. If dad is still working from home to the point that he needs to make a living and that's not a possibility, so then set it up so that he's in a room where it's not like a tease, where the kids aren't disturbing him and he's not like frustrating to you. But I think it's really important for men to notice like, hey, if I have more time because I'm here, I should offer to help with the children, and women to not be shy about expressing their feelings, because we're seeing a little bit of strain on the marriages and we want to get ahead of that.
Yes, so important, such an important point. I think that probably a lot of partners are thinking like they can't say anything, they can't ask, you know, well, he's working, so I can't say anything, but you definitely can communicate.
Have a dialogue. If he can't, then he'll tell you, but have a conversation about it.
When you're free, would you mind helping with this? Like, if you have a minute, I would love if I could have a hand. And I think for the most part, like in healthy relationships, they do want to help, but like
they do want to be involved. Yeah, they can spend 5 minutes reading a story to one of the kids while you're attending to one of the other children. It makes a huge difference. I told a bunch of men this week, I was like, just offer to spend private one-on-one time, play a game of Uno, read a story, whatever, with each of your children. If you're home, normally not home for bedtime, you can take time out of even your work from home day to do those things. But families are not in the habit of doing it. Women, do not be passive aggressive and withholding. Ask your husband, say, hey, listen, now that you're home, are you going to have time to be able to help? Because I have more on my plate than I normally do, right? Yeah. And if they say, I really just can't, whatever, then it has to be a conversation. But they won't know what you need if you don't say so. So that's really important. And one more point I wanted to make is, don't neglect physical activity. Even if it's not so easy to get outside, put on a yoga video for the kids, put on some music and do a dance party, do an aerobics activity. If you have the space to run around, just like, you know, throw a ball around your living room. You know, kids and grownups do much better when there's some kind of movement involved in the day. It doesn't have to be like, you know, professional or organized, but just like, you know, move your body. It's really good for your brain.
Yeah, definitely. And helps relieve a lot of that like built up tension.
Nervous energy, sure.
Energy, definitely. Yeah, such important points. That was amazing, Elisheva, as always. I miss our walks on the boardwalk and our get-togethers. Hopefully, my 4-year-old always says, she's like, after coronavirus. So now
I love it.
Well, so now after coronavirus, I hope we'll get together.
I would love that. I'll make the coffee.
I can't wait. But hopefully everyone will stay healthy.
Did I lose you?
Oh, I'm still here. Do you hear me?
Now I hear you. I lost you for a second. Yeah.
So everyone should be healthy and stay well. This was so helpful to me. I'm sure it was helpful to everyone else. I'm going to save it for 24 hours, and then I'm also going to upload it to YouTube if you are okay with that, Elisheva.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah. You know, like we said before, we just want to like help as many people as we can. So Thank you so much for joining. Rachel, thank you so much for hosting me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everyone.
Okay. Bye. Good night, everyone.